You're listening to LUTG Radio's WKKP Digital Broadcasting. Alrighty. So right now we got the White House there. President Obama is about to come on right now and speak at the National Governors Association. So we're going to just tune in live to that right now.
Say, what can we do as we accelerate and lengthen our stride in our service to our respective states and the people of America? So again, we thank you for your service. I'm pleased to be associated with you. I learn from you all the time, and makes me a better governor of Utah. And I do come to appreciate that we have a lot more in common as Republicans, Democrats, Independents than we have differences. We need to emphasize the similarities. And in my own state, 80% of the legislation that's passed by Republicans and Democrats in Utah is passed unanimously. I think that's something we ought to always emphasize, is the similarities and how we can get things done working together. With that, let me take the opportunity to introduce people who need no introduction, the Vice President and the President. The Vice President's certainly been a friend. We're looking forward to hosting him in Utah this coming week as he comes and is going to be talking about the moonshot of cancer and what can we do to find a cure for cancer, something that we all know about and has touched our families and our friends. And the opportunity for him to engage with the Huntsman Cancer Institute in Utah and see what the private sector is doing and what we can do better working together to see if we can't rid ourselves of this scourge that impacts us in such a negative way. A senator since his 30s, 36 years is a senator, and of course the Vice President now doing a lot of the heavy lifting on behalf of this administration. So we're honored to have Vice President Joe Biden with us. And then the President, who we had the great opportunity last night to associate with in the dinner last night, has broken barriers for this country. Again, as I mentioned in our toast last night, the realization and the resolution of our founding fathers that all men are created equal, and we see the diversification that has come in our country, and we appreciate the opportunity to be with the President and for his service and dedication. And he and the First Lady is good examples to us all of good family values and what we can do and what we can become in this country if we apply ourselves. So with that, let's welcome the Vice President, Joe Biden, and the President of the United States, Barack Obama.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Everybody, please have a seat. Thank you so much. Thank you. Please have a seat, everybody. It is wonderful to see all of you. I hope you had just the right amount of fun last night and not too much fun. It's hard to believe that was the final dinner Michelle and I get to host for you. Like me, some of you might be in the final year of your last term, working as hard as you can to get as much done as possible for the folks that you represent. Fixing roads, educating our children, helping people retrain, appointing judges, the usual stuff. Those of you who've been in office for a while have also witnessed all the progress that we have made together, and it has been a partnership. The millions of new jobs created, millions of people newly covered with health insurance, the new energy projects that are popping up all across every state that's represented here. I do want to comment, before I take questions, on the issue of security for the American people. Whatever our party, we all raise our hand and take an oath and assume the solemn responsibility to protect our citizens, and that is a mission that should unite us all as Americans. Today, we're focused on three threats in particular. First and foremost is terrorism. The attacks in Garland, Texas, in Chattanooga, and San Bernardino were attacks in good and decent communities, but they were also attacks on our entire country. As Americans, we are united in support of the men and women in uniform from every state who lead the coalition we've built with the mission to destroy ISIL. We're working with other nations to prevent terrorists from entering the United States. We're unwavering in our efforts to prevent attacks here at home. And that's where the partnership with your states come in. This is a shared mission. We have to stay vigilant. Across the country, we've got more than 100 joint terrorism task forces, federal, state, local experts working together to disrupt threats. And at the state level, your fusion cells are pushing information out to law enforcement. We also need to make sure our extraordinary law enforcement professionals and first responders have the equipment and the resources that they need. And we've got to stay united as one American family, working with communities to help prevent loved ones from becoming radicalized and rejecting any politics that tries to divide the American people on the basis of faith. So this is a shared project. It's not something that we do together. And one of the genuine areas of progress that I've seen since I came into office, and it was started in the previous administration, and this was one of the findings of 9/11, was breaking down some of the silos between federal, state, and local law enforcement when it comes to countering terrorism. We've made progress on that, but that's where state and local partners are absolutely critical. This is not something that the federal government can do alone, particularly because many of the attacks may end up being lone wolf attacks rather than those imported from the outside. The attack in San Bernardino killed 14 of our fellow Americans, and here's a hard truth. We probably lost even more Americans than that to guns this weekend alone. On Saturday, another one of our communities was terrorized by gun violence. As many of you read, 6 people were gunned down in a rampage in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Before I joined all of you, I called the mayor, the sheriff, and the police chief there and told them that they would have whatever federal support they needed in their investigation. Their local officials and first responders, by the way, did an outstanding job in apprehending the individual very quickly. But you got families who are shattered today. Earlier this year, I took some steps that will make it harder for dangerous people like this individual to buy a gun, but clearly we're going to need to do more if we're going to keep innocent Americans safe. And I've got to assume that all of you are just as tired as I am of seeing this stuff happen in your states. So that's an area where we also need to partner and think about what we can do in a common sense way, in a bipartisan way, without some of the ideological rhetoric that so often surrounds that issue. A second area of threats that we're focused on is cyber threats. The technology that connects us like never before also allows our adversaries to do us harm. Hackers and nations have targeted our military, our corporations, federal government, and state governments. They're a threat to our national security. They're also a threat to our economic leadership. They're a threat to our critical infrastructure. They're a threat to the privacy and public safety of the American people. This is a complex challenge, and we're not going to be able to meet it alone. We've made a lot of progress these past 7 years, including sharing more information with industry and with your states. But all of us are still vulnerable. So this is why earlier this month I launched the Cybersecurity National Action Plan and proposed significant funding to push our cybersecurity efforts in a more aggressive direction. We're going to start a major overhaul of federal computer systems. I want to do more with your states, including sharing more information about threats, improving our joint response capabilities. We have initiated a joint bipartisan commission made up of one of my national security advisors, former national security advisors, Tom Donilon, but joined with the former CEO of IBM so that they can work together to help provide us a sense of direction both at the federal and state levels as well as the private sector in terms of how we move forward on this. We're going to want your input, and I think that we probably have some good ideas about where your vulnerabilities are in terms of your state databases and what you're doing there. So that's an area where I think we can profitably work together. Finally, we all have to remain vigilant when it comes to the spread of disease. Since late last year, my administration has been focused on the threat of Zika. So far, while there's no evidence of Zika transmission from mosquitoes here in the continental United States, there are confirmed cases in Puerto Rico. And as leaders, it's important that we convey very basic facts, including the fact that Zika is not like Ebola. Ebola was primarily spread from human to human. Based on what we know right now, Zika spreads predominantly through the bite of a certain kind of mosquito that's limited to certain parts of the country. Symptoms are generally very mild. Most folks don't even realize that they have it, but as all of you have read, the possible connection between Zika, birth defects, and other serious health problems means that we've got to take precautions, particularly with respect to women who are pregnant or are trying to get pregnant. So we're going to be fighting this disease at every level with every tool at our disposal. I've called on Congress to approve about $1.9 billion in emergency funding for our efforts at home and abroad, including research into better diagnostic tools, new vaccines, improved methods of mosquito control, and support for Puerto Rico and territories where there are confirmed cases. And we're going to be launching an aggressive coordinated campaign with the NGA to stop Zika at the source and keep Americans healthy. I hope each of you join us, especially if you're in some of the southern states where the risk of transmission may be higher. So, fighting terrorism and gun violence, combating cyber attacks and cyber threats, guarding against the outbreak of disease, these are some areas where there shouldn't be any dispute. We've got to be working together to keep our country safe and strong. And I look forward to the partnership with the NGA and each and every one of you in all of these areas. I should point out that one of the things I'm proudest of over the course of the last 7 years is that the federal coordination with state and local governments with respect to disaster response, I think has been extraordinary. I'm really proud of the work that Craig Fugate and FEMA has done, and I think that kind of model of partnership across many of these threats is exactly what's needed to give the American people the confidence that their government's on their side when they need it most. All right? So with that, I'm going to take some questions, and I'm going to start with your chairman, Governor Herbert. You can use the microphone.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. We, again, are appreciative of your willingness to let us come in and talk with you and the Vice President about issues that are near and dear to us as governors and near and dear to us as an association with the NGA. I'm struck by the ability we've had to have cordial relationships with your cabinet. I want to compliment your people there. In fact, one of them talked about the importance of communication and used the term cooperative federalism as really a way for us to get things done better in a collaborative fashion between the states and the federal government. I'll just mention one that comes to my mind, and that's working with your Department of Interior, Sally Jewell, as Secretary. During the federal shutdown, we were able to work together, communicate, and collaborate, and open up the 5 national parks in Utah to the benefit of the people of Utah and Americans and people, really world travelers overall. So, again, an effort of communication and cooperation, which I think is a great success. I do hearken back to a failure, maybe an epic failure, lack of communication on a previous administration, where a national monument was designated in Utah, larger than the state of Delaware, 2.5 times larger than Rhode Island. still, the Vice President made a little.
Where's Jack?
Yeah. At any rate, the problem was that Governor Mike Leavitt then found out about that designation, by reading the Washington Post. That was the other side of the coin of not good communication. I expect all governors have got successes and probably where we could do better. And so my question to you, Mr. President, really is in the effort of the National Governors Association. What can we do as an NGA, as states, to communicate better with the federal government? And what can the federal government do better to communicate with the states so that we have this spirit of cooperation? And really this should go post us. We'll all ride off in the sunset sometime, but it'd be nice if we had some kind of institutional process to make sure that we work together in a collaborative fashion, communicate better, and have better outcomes on behalf of the American people.
Good. Well, first of all, I think the NGA generally has been a terrific partner for us. I hope you feel the same way. My instructions to my cabinet, to my secretaries, have always been that we have certain laws, statutes, mandates that we have to abide by. We have certain policies that we care deeply about. But my instructions to them have been, you check with the governors and the localities that are being impacted, and if they have ideas in a more flexible, sensible way, and we've got that flexibility, we should exercise it. And that's been my consistent message, and I think many of you have benefited from those kinds of interactions. What I do is Gary, to throw the question back at you, not for today, but maybe one of the projects that we can do jointly together, is sort of do an inventory of what's worked and what hasn't institutionally in terms of communication. Where have been there areas where governors have been concerned that they haven't gotten the heads up fast enough? Where are the areas where communications has been strong? And let's see if we can improve that communication. But my overall impression has been communication with the cabinet secretaries has been good. I think that our Intergovernmental Affairs Office has tried to be very active. There may be some additional things that we could do to improve that, and I'd be happy to hear ideas from your side about what could be done. I will tell you that probably where there's the biggest gap in communications has to do with our interactions with governors versus our interactions with your congressional delegations. That's where oftentimes things diverge. So we'll have a conversation with the governors, and they'll identify a priority. We work out some approach to get something done, and then it turns out that the congressional delegations have an entirely different idea. And the biggest example would be on transportation, for example, where Anthony Fox probably traveled to every single one of your states, talked, and before that, Ray LaHood talked about things that needed to get done. Everybody was excited about getting them done, but we just couldn't get Congress to move. And so one of the things that I think would be interesting as we explore better communications is how do we maybe create a triangle where we have some interaction with states, a state's governors and its congressional delegation at the same time. Now, sometimes that's difficult because there are different parties, maybe different political agendas. Sometimes, though, there may be commonality, and it's just a matter of closing the loop so that congressional staff know what the governor's staff is saying, know what our staff is saying. So, just assign the Congress to them generally. Well, they've got their own legislatures. I know that they enjoy those interactions tremendously. Next, Terry McAuliffe. Where's Terry? Here he is.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me first, great night last night. Thank you on behalf of all the governors. Shaka Khan. I've been listening to her for 40 years.
That was Michelle, basically, that put that together. I tried to take credit last night, and nobody believed me, and rightly so.
But let me just say that we just finished, Mr. President, 4 great days of the Governors Association with great leadership of Gary. But Gary and I met with your team, Jerry, about 6 weeks ago, and Valerie, we laid out what we needed. your administration gave us everything we needed. We had the secure briefing at the FBI. So let me just say this has been a great meeting. On behalf of all the governors here, let's give a round of applause to the administration and the great work that they did. And thank you very much. We're here from 50 states, different political parties. We all have different interests in our states, but one issue that brings a lot of us together is the issue of trade. It is a global economy that we have today. Many of us do international trade trips. I've done 13 in my first 2 years. I just got back from the Middle East and from Cuba. 95% of the world's customers live outside of America. 81% of the growth in the next 5 years will occur outside America. Trade is critical to grow our economies. So, Mr. President, could you give us an update on the trade policy, where legislation is, and most importantly, what can we do to help you push trade with the Congress? Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that question, Terry. And Governor Herbert and I were talking about this a little bit yesterday. When I visited Utah, you told me how much of Utah's economy depends on exports and international trade, and that's true for so many of us. Now, maybe the way to answer this is to give sort of a broad overview of how I think the politics have shaped the narrative around trade, and then let me give you some of the facts and what's going on with TPP. Over our lifetimes, and certainly accelerated over the last 25, 30 years, this has become a global economy and not a national economy. The global supply chain, distribution, the fact that a company can set up house anywhere where there's an internet service, the fact that these big cargo containers can ship things more efficiently than ever before, the logistical hubs and speed with which they can move goods and services around the world. All of this has created a global marketplace. The good news is that we are best positioned to take advantage of this global marketplace than anybody else. We've got the best cards. We've got the best businesses. We've got the best technology, the best innovation. We've got the best workers. We are a free market, dynamic economy like nobody else. The challenge is that there have been disruptions as a consequence of that global trade. There's no doubt about it. And in every one of your states, there have been times where somebody has been affected. And not all the trade deals in the past were designed just to look out for workers. There were times where it was good for consumers. It was good for the businesses that may have found lower wages. But it wasn't always good for those communities that had big plants, particularly in manufacturing, that got shipped overseas. And that's made people suspicious about trade, and understandably so. You know, on the one hand, people benefit from low prices and low inflation and the degree to which globalization